African billionaire saw his former African nanny sleeping at the airport. What he did next will move everyone. He was boarding his private jet for a business trip that would change the course of his empire when he froze in his tracks. Curled up on a cold plastic chair in the corner of the departure hall, wearing the same kind of threadbare sweater she used to wear when she tucked him into bed decades ago, was the woman who had raised him like her own. For years, she had been the one who sang him to sleep, cooked his meals, and protected him from the chaos of his parents' high-profile world. Now, she looked frail, forgotten, and completely alone. In that moment, the man who had built skyscrapers and negotiated billion-dollar deals faced the most personal decision of his life. What happened next would not only shock everyone who heard the story, it would reveal the kind of heart no amount of wealth can buy. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more inspiring stories like this one. The glass walls of Terminal 3 reflected the warm golden light of the African sunrise, but inside, the air was cool with the hum of early morning travelers. The luxury wing of the airport was quiet, just the way Kwaka Mensah liked it. As the youngest self-made billionaire in Ghana, every public appearance was an event, and every trip abroad was accompanied by cameras, investors, and a string of assistants ready to manage his schedule. Today, however, he was traveling light. No press, no entourage, just his personal assistant waiting by the gate with a briefcase full of documents for the upcoming conference in London. Kwaka's mind was on the speech he would deliver to hundreds of CEOs about African innovation, a speech he'd rehearsed a dozen times. He was walking briskly toward the VIP lounge when his eyes caught something unusual on the far side of the hall. At first, it was just a figure slumped on a row of hard chairs, a sight not uncommon in an airport. But something about the way the person's head tilted to the side, the way their hands rested on their lap, tugged at a thread deep in his memory. His steps slowed. The crowds flowed past him. But he stood still, narrowing his eyes as the image came into focus. The woman was thin, her sweater frayed at the cuffs. Her shoes were worn down at the heel, and the travel bag at her feet looked decades old. Her hair, now streaked with gray, was tied back in a familiar way. The years had added lines to her face, but there was no mistaking it. It was Amma. The world around him seemed to fade. Amma, the woman who had been more of a parent than his own busy mother and father, the one who had bandaged his scraped knees, chased away nightmares, and taught him to say his prayers at night, was sitting here, alone, asleep in a crowded airport like she had nowhere else to go. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Memories hit him like a rush of wind. Amma singing softly in the kitchen while stirring a pot of jollof rice, laughing as she lifted him high into the air, scolding him when he tried to skip homework. She had been a constant in his life for 12 years, until one day she was gone. He remembered the morning she left. He was just 15, and his father had called him into the study to say that Amma had decided to move on. But even at that age, Kwaka knew there was more to the story. She had hugged him tightly, whispered, "I will always pray for you," and walked out of the big house without looking back. And now she was here. Kwaka glanced toward his personal assistant, who was watching him with mild confusion. "Sir, the lounge is this way," the man said politely. But Kwaka barely heard him. His feet began to move, almost without his permission, carrying him toward a row of seats where Amma slept. As he approached, he noticed the small details. The faint swelling in her hands, the way her shoulders hunched forward as if she'd been carrying weight, emotional or physical, for too long. A half-empty bottle of water sat beside her, and an untouched packet of biscuits lay on her lap. She looked exhausted, but there was no peace in her sleep. Her brow was furrowed, as if even in dreams she was fighting some unseen battle. Kwaka's chest tightened. He was a man who could write a check large enough to buy an airline, yet here was a woman who had once been his world, sitting in this state. A dozen questions raced through his mind. Why was she here? Was she traveling? Was she stranded? Was she homeless? He hesitated for a second, suddenly unsure. Would she even want to see him after all these years? What if she didn't remember him? What if she resented him for something he didn't even know about? But the thought of walking away felt impossible. "Ma!" he said softly, using the name he'd called her as a boy. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, as if pulled from a heavy sleep. She blinked, squinting at the tall figure in front of her. For a moment, there was no recognition, just confusion. Then her lips parted slightly, and she breathed out his name. Kwaku. He felt his throat tighten. Yes, it's me. She sat up straighter, looking both startled and embarrassed. She smoothed her sweater and glanced around, as though worried about being seen like this. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice quieter than he remembered. I should be asking you that, he replied gently. Why are you here? Are you waiting for flight? Alma hesitated, her eyes dropping to her lap. I missed it, she murmured. I was going to see my sister in Kumasi, but her voice trailed off, and she didn't finish the sentence. Kwaku studied her face. Something wasn't right. There was more to the story, just as there had been more the day she left his family's home. But now wasn't the time to press. Come with me, he said firmly. You shouldn't be sitting here like this. Alma shook her head quickly. No, you have somewhere to be. I don't want to trouble you. He crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. Alma, you raised me. You're the reason I am who I am today. You could never be a trouble to me. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment he saw the same warmth that had comforted him as a boy, but she still seemed hesitant, almost guarded. Please, he said softly, let me help. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Kwaku stood and offered his hand. She took it slowly, and he felt how cold her fingers were. As they walked toward the VIP lounge, he noticed other travelers glancing curiously at the pair, a man in an immaculate tailored suit escorting an older woman in worn clothes. He didn't care. Inside the lounge, the staff greeted him with practiced smiles, but those smiles faltered when they saw Alma. Kwaku's expression made it clear that she was his guest, and within minutes, they had seated her in the most comfortable chair, brought her hot tea, and arranged for a warm meal. As she sipped her tea, Alma seemed both grateful and uncomfortable, as if she wasn't sure she belonged in such a place. Kwaku sat opposite her, leaning forward. It's been a long time, he began. I've thought about you often, but I never imagined our paths. The lounge's soft lighting cast a gentle glow over the polished marble floors and leather armchairs, but to Kwaku, the comfort around him felt almost irrelevant. His focus was entirely on Alma. She sat across from him, her hands wrapped around the steaming mug of tea, like it was the only warmth she had felt in days. She had always carried herself with quiet dignity, even when life was difficult. But now he noticed something different, an invisible weight pressing her shoulders down, a hesitance in her eyes when they met his. I don't even know where to start, he said after a pause. I feel like I've been waiting years for this moment. Yet, now that you're here, I'm afraid if I say the wrong thing, you might disappear again. Alma looked at him with a small, sad smile. I never disappeared, Kwaku. I was always somewhere, just not in your world anymore. The word stung more than he expected. You were my world, he replied softly. You still are. She glanced away, clearly fighting back emotion. And you were mine. But things happened. Things I couldn't explain to you then. You were just a boy. Kwaku leaned forward, his voice low but urgent. Then explain to me now. I'm not a boy anymore, Alma. I deserve to know why you left. One day you were tucking me in. The next day you were gone. No goodbye letter. No visits. Nothing. Do you know how many times I asked my father about you? How many times I tried to find out where you went? Her eyes fell to the table. I know, and I'm sorry. The silence between them was thick, filled with memories neither wanted to say aloud. I was told you wanted to leave, he said after a moment, that you found a better job. Alma shook her head slowly. That's not the truth. I didn't want to leave. I was forced to. The words hit him like a blow. Forced? By who? She hesitated, biting her lip, as though weighing whether to tell him the full truth. Then she met his eyes. Your father? Kwaku's heartbeat quickened. Why? Alma took a deep breath. Because I spoke up. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And when I refused to keep quiet, he said my services were no longer needed. He gave me a small envelope with money, told him to pack my things, and had the driver take me to the bus station. That was the end. Quokka's stomach churned. What could you possibly have seen that would make him send you away like that? She looked around the lounge, as if afraid someone might overhear. Then she leaned closer. Your father was doing business with people he shouldn't have trusted. I overheard conversations about money, about deals that could ruin lives. And one night, I saw something that convinced me those deals weren't just bad business. They were dangerous. I told him I couldn't keep silent if it meant people would be hurt. That's when everything changed. Quokka sat back, his mind spinning. He had grown up believing his father's fortune was built entirely on legitimate investments and real estate. But hearing this from Alma, the woman who had never once lied to him, it made him question everything. Why didn't you come to me later? He asked quietly. When I was older, when I could have helped? I tried, she said, her voice breaking. But your family made sure I couldn't get near you. Every time I called, they hung up. Every letter I sent was returned. I didn't want to cause you trouble. You were going to inherit everything. Your life was ahead of you. I couldn't be the one to ruin it. Her eyes were wet now, but she blinked away the tears. So I stayed away. I took work where I could. Sometimes as a cleaner, sometimes caring for children. But it was never steady and, well, time passes. Health fades. Money runs out. And here I am. Quokka's hands tightened into fists on the table. You should never have ended up here. Never. Alma reached out and placed her hand gently over his. Don't be angry for me. I've had joy, too. I've seen good people, kind people. But when I saw you today, I knew God had given me this moment, even if it was just to see you one last time. One last time. Quokka's voice sharpened. Alma, this isn't one last time. You're not going anywhere. Not like this. Not while I have the means to make sure you're safe, cared for, and happy. You were my family when no one else truly was. If I could give you the world, it wouldn't be enough. She smiled faintly, but he could see the disbelief in her eyes, as if she couldn't quite imagine a life of comfort anymore. Years of struggle had taught her to expect little. The lounge attendant approached discreetly. Mr. Mensah, your flight to London will begin boarding in 20 minutes. Quokka barely looked at him. Hold my seat, he said flatly, his gaze still locked on Alma. Sir? The attendant asked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. I said hold my seat. Or better yet, cancel it. I'm not going to London today. Alma shook her head in alarm. Quokka, you can't cancel your business trip. Because of me. Yes, I can. And I just did. He pulled out his phone, firing off a quick message to his assistant to reschedule the entire trip. He didn't care about the conference. Right now, there was only one priority. Alma's lips trembled. Why are you doing this? Because I lost you once, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. And I'm not going to lose you again. Whatever you've been through, we'll face it together now. For the first time since she'd woken up in the airport, Alma's eyes softened into something that looked like hope. Now, he continued, you're going to tell me exactly what you need. A place to stay. Medical care. Anything. And I'll make sure you have it before the sun sets today. Alma tried to protest, but he stopped her with a raised hand. No arguments. I've made my decision. There was a long pause before she nodded. All right, but there's something you need to know before you bring me back into your life. Quokka leaned in. What is it? Alma's eyes darkened. Those people your father dealt with, they haven't gone away. And if they know you're helping me now, they might come after you too. Her warning hung in the air like a shadow, turning the moment from emotional reunion into something far more dangerous. Quokka didn't flinch. Then they'll have to deal with me. I'm not the boy I was when they pushed you out, and I'm not afraid of them. But deep inside, he knew the drive from the airport to Quokka's penthouse was short in distance but long in silence. Alma sat beside him in the back of the chauffeured sedan, her thin hands clasped tightly together on her lap. She gazed out the tinted window as the streets of Accra rolled past, vibrant markets giving way to sleek towers. Yet her eyes weren't really on the city. They seemed fixed somewhere far away, in a place only she could see. Quokka, on the other hand, couldn't take his eyes off her. The years had changed her. Her frame was smaller now, her shoulders more stooped, but the lines in her face told stories of endurance, not defeat. Still, there was a weight about her, a kind of invisible armor built from years of surviving without help. He wanted to speak, to ask her about the warning she'd given him in the airport lounge, but something told him to wait until she felt ready. He reached across the seat and laid his hand gently over hers. "You're safe now, Alma." She looked at him for the briefest moment and managed a small smile, but it faded quickly. Safe is a word I haven't trusted in a very long time, Kwaku. I'm not sure I should start trusting it now. They rode the rest of the way in near silence until the car pulled up in front of the towering glass skyscraper where Kwaku lived. The driver opened their door, and they stepped into the building's private lobby, where marble floors gleamed under warm lights. The concierge greeted Kwaku with respect, but his sharp glance at Alma didn't go unnoticed. In the elevator, Alma stayed close to the corner, holding her old bag like it was her lifeline. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, she froze. The space stretched wide and open. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the ocean. The skyline glittered in the distance, and soft, modern furniture was arranged with effortless elegance. Alma's voice was quiet, almost awed. This is where you live?" "It's where you'll live now," Kwaku said simply, setting her bag on a nearby chair. Her head turned sharply toward him. "Kwaku, I can't." "Yes, you can," he interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. "There's more space here than I need. You'll have your own room, your own key, and anything else you require." Alma stepped toward the windows but didn't answer right away. Instead, she kept her eyes on the horizon. "It's not the space I'm worried about. It's what might follow me here." Kwaku came to stand beside her. "You mean the people from my father's dealings?" She gave a slow nod. "They don't forgive, and they don't forget. To them, I'm a loose end, and now you might be too." Her words landed heavily, but Kwaku didn't flinch. "I have security. If they come for you, they'll have to go through me first." Alma let out a small, humorless laugh. "Money can buy walls, Kwaku, but the people we're talking about, they walk through walls if they need to." Before he could reply, the elevator dinged again. His assistant, Mensa, stepped out holding a leather folder. "Sir, the documents of the London conference," he said, placing them on the table. "Also, a man has been calling repeatedly. Refuses to give his name. Says you'll regret ignoring him." Kwaku's brow tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Take no more of his calls. And send me his number." Mensa nodded, his eyes flicking briefly toward Alma before he returned to the elevator. Alma didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said quietly, "That's how it starts, Kwaku. First they reach out, then they watch, and then..." She trailed off, but the meaning was clear. He didn't want to admit that her warning was already proving true. That night, after settling her into the guest suite, a room with its own balcony, bath, and ocean view, Kwaku lingered at the door. "This is your home now. No one will hurt you here." Alma smiled faintly. "It's been a long time since I believed in a place like that." When she closed the door, he went to study, meaning to review the conference notes. But instead, he found himself staring at the city lights below, replaying every word Alma had said. Around midnight, he stepped onto his balcony with a glass of water. The sea air was cool, carrying the faint sounds of the city. Then, something caught his eye, a black SUV idling across the street, headlights off. Two silhouettes sat inside, unmoving. His instincts sharpened. He took out his phone and snapped a photo, then sent it to his head of security. "Find out who owns this car." Now, the reply came half an hour later. "Shell Company. No physical address. Ties to Westfield Holdings." Kwaku's grip tightened on the phone. Westfield Holdings. The same name whispered in connection to his father's shadowy deals. He looked down the hall toward Alma's room, the ocean breeze curling through the glass doors. She was here now, under his roof, and whatever ghost had chased her for years had just found them both. Only this time, he thought grimly, they weren't dealing with the same defenseless woman they'd driven out of his life. They were dealing with him, and he wasn't going to let them take her away again. Kwaku didn't sleep that night. Even after the black SUV left the street below, The image of its dark shape stayed fixed in his mind. Alma's warning echoed over and over. They don't forgive. They don't forget. He had built his career on anticipating threats and acting before they grew. But this was different. This wasn't a corporate rival or a political opponent. This was a shadow tied to his own family's past. By sunrise, he had decided there would be no waiting, no hoping the problem would fade. If Westfield Holdings had resurfaced, he needed to know why and what they wanted from Alma. He called his head of security, Kwame Adu, a man who had once led special operations in the military. I want every piece of information on Westfield Holdings, Kwaku ordered. Their history, their people, their partners. And if there's anyone who used to work for them and is willing to talk, I want their name by tonight. You think they're the ones in the SUV? Kwame asked. I know they are. And if they're watching this building, it's because Alma's here. Kwame's voice stayed calm. 24 hours. I'll find something. Kwaku ended the call and went to check on Alma. She was on the balcony of the guest suite, sipping tea, wrapped in a thick white robe from the wardrobe. The ocean stretched out beyond her, calm and endless, but her eyes were distant. You didn't sleep? She said without turning. Neither did you, Kwaku replied, pulling a chair beside her. Alma, I need you to tell me everything. No more half-truths. What happened with Westfield? Why do they see you as a threat? She let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the cup. Your father, he was tied to them. Westfield wasn't just a trading company. It was a cover, money laundering, illegal shipments, contracts bought with bribes. I didn't understand all of it then, but I knew enough to see it was dangerous. She paused, her eyes dropping to the floor. One night, I stayed late cleaning the study. He'd been drinking. He left a folder open on his desk. Inside were photographs of men and women I didn't recognize at first, until I saw their names. They were journalists. There were notes about their routines, where they lived, who they spoke to, instructions that sounded like they weren't meant to live much longer. Kwaku's stomach tightened. You're telling me my father had people silenced? I don't know what happened to all of them, Alma said softly, but one of those faces was on the news a week later. Missing. After that, your father treated me differently. He knew I'd seen too much. When I told him I wouldn't keep quiet, he gave me money, had the driver take me to the station, and told me never to come back. Her voice didn't tremble, but Kwaku could hear the weight in it. He stood pacing. So if they think you might talk now, they see you as a liability. Even without proof, sometimes memory is enough to make powerful people nervous. Before he could respond, Kwame messaged him, back in an hour. You want to see this? When Kwame arrived, he carried a thick folder. Westfield has changed names at least 5 times, he began, laying out pages covered in corporate diagrams. They've done mining, shipping, import-export, but it's all tied to offshore accounts. And here, he tapped one page, joint ventures with your father's companies. 15 years ago, they moved a shipment labeled as machinery parts. Customs flagged it. When they opened the crates, they found weapons. The officer who reported it, gone 2 months later. Kwaku's eyes scanned the page, anger building. And Alma was caught in the middle. Kwame nodded. She didn't have to know details. Just being aware was enough to get her pushed out. Before Kwaku could say more, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. We know she's with you. Hand her over, and this ends quietly. He turned the screen toward Kwame. They're getting bolder. Kwame took a photo of it. We'll trace the sender. But you need to decide, are we going to keep her hidden or are we going to confront them? Kwaku didn't hesitate. We confront them. Kwame's mouth curved into the faintest smile. Then you'll want to meet Kojo Ansa. He runs Westfield's operations here. But you won't get close unless he wants you there. Kwaku considered for a moment. Then we'll give him a reason to invite me. That evening, Kwaku went to Alma's room. She was reading but looked up immediately when she saw his face. You're going after them, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, starting with their man here. Her brow furrowed. Kwaku, these men don't bargain. They control through fear. If you challenge them, they'll come harder. Let them, he said. But they're going to learn I'm not afraid of them. And I'm not my father. Alma's expression softened, but worry lingered in her eyes. Just don't lose yourself in the fight. I won't, he promised. The next afternoon, Quokka stepped into a private coastal club where Kojo Ansa was known to hold meetings. The place was all luxury and secrecy, high walls, sea views, and the smell of expensive cigars. Kojo sat at a corner table, broad-shouldered, wearing a gold watch, flanked by two silent men. Quokka walked straight up to him. Kojo Ansa, we need to talk. Kojo eyed him with mild amusement. And you are? Quokka Mensa. The woman you're looking for, Alma, raised me. She's under my protection. If anything happens to her, I'll take apart everything you've built, and I'll do it publicly. Kojo chuckled, swirling his drink. Bold words. Your father understood these matters better than you. This is not a game. No, Quokka said, leaning closer, his voice low but steady. It's not, which is why you should understand. Whatever power you think you have here, I can take it from you. Kojo studied him for a moment, then smiled thinly. You're not your father. We'll see if that's a strength or a weakness. Quokka straightened, meeting his gaze without blinking. We will. As he walked out, he felt Kojo's eyes on his back. The war had just begun. The night air over Kra was thick with humidity, but Quokka hardly noticed. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, gazing out over the city lights, his reflection a faint silhouette against the glass. Behind him, the guest suite door was closed. Alma was finally sleeping after days of restless nights. He had promised her that tonight it would end. Kwame Adu, his head of security, stood by the desk, the glow from the table lamp casting sharp angles across his face. The message came through 15 minutes ago, he said, holding out Quokka's phone. They want a meeting. Tomorrow night. The docks. Quokka took the phone, reading the short, taunting text. Come alone. Bring her, or we'll come for both of you. He set the device down carefully. They want me to be afraid, he said quietly. They want me to feel cornered. He turned to face Kwame. But they don't realize this is a position I like best. Kwame's eyes narrowed. You know it's a trap. They'll have men, maybe snipers. And Kojo Ansa doesn't negotiate. I'm not going there to negotiate, Quokka replied. The next 24 hours were a blur of planning. Quokka knew the docks, dark, sprawling, and riddled with places to hide. He also knew Westfield's arrogance. They believed intimidation would force his hand. What they didn't know was that Kwame had already been 2 steps ahead, setting up surveillance and quietly planting men in positions they wouldn't expect. Alma tried to speak to him that afternoon, worry written all over her face. Kwaku, please don't go. If you confront them, you'll give them exactly what they want. He took her hands in his, steady and warm. What they want is to break us. That's why I have to go. Alma, you've spent years looking over your shoulder. I'm ending that tonight. She searched his eyes, as if looking for some crack in his resolve, but found none. Then promise me you'll come back. I promise, he said, and he meant it. Night fell quickly. The convoy was small. Quokka's armored SUV, followed at a discreet distance by 2 unmarked vehicles holding Kwame's men. The roads to the docks were nearly empty at that hour, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows. When they reached the designated spot, Quokka stepped out alone, the damp scent of salt water and rust filling his lungs. In the distance, cranes stood like skeletal giants against the night sky. Kojo Ansa was waiting. He emerged from the shadows flanked by 4 men, all broad and silent, their hands resting near concealed weapons. Kojo's gold watch glinted even in the dim light. Quokka Mensa, Kojo said, his voice carrying an oily confidence. You came. You wanted me here, Quokka answered. Now I'm here. Let's finish this. Kojo smiled faintly. You've made things complicated. Hiding her. Threatening me. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give you one chance. Walk away. Leave the woman, and this never touches your name. Quokka took a step forward, closing the space between them. You don't understand. I'm not here to make a deal. I'm here to tell you this ends tonight. Your threats, your men watching my building, all of it. Alma is under my protection now. If you come near her again, I will tear down Westfield Holdings piece by piece, and I'll do it so publicly that not even your friends in high places will save you." The smile on Kojo's face vanished. "Careful, boy. You're speaking to men who built empires before you knew how to walk." And yet, Quokka said, his tone steady as steel, "Here I am, standing in front of you, not afraid." There was a tense moment where neither man moved, the sound of water slapping against the dock the only thing between them. Then Kojo raised his hand slightly, a signal. Two of his men stepped forward, as if to flank Kwaku. That was when the floodlights snapped on. From the shadows above the dock, Kwame's men emerged, trained, armed, and already in position. The red dot of laser sights danced on the chests of Kojo's guards. Kojo froze. "You came with an army," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "No," Quokka replied. "I came prepared. There's a difference." Kwame's voice called from the shadows. "Try to move, Kojo, and you'll be tasting the ocean floor before you can blink." For the first time, Quokka saw uncertainty in Kojo's eyes. Still, the man tried to mask it with bravado. "You think this will scare me off?" "I don't care if you're scared," Quokka said. "I care if you understand. If you so much as whisper Alma's name again, you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you'd listened to me tonight." Kojo's jaw tightened, but he gave a short nod to his men. Slowly, they stepped back. "This isn't over," Kojo said finally. "Yes, it is," Quokka answered. "You just don't know it yet." The ride back to the penthouse was silent until Quokka walked into the living room and found Alma waiting. She stood when she saw him, relief flooding her face. "You're back." "I told you I would be," he said, pulling her into a gentle embrace. For a moment, neither spoke, just the steady rhythm of their breathing filling the space. Finally, Alma stepped back, searching his face. "Is it really over?" "As over as it can be," he admitted. "Men like Kojo, they survive on fear. When fear doesn't work, they look for easier prey. He won't risk coming for you again, not after tonight." She nodded, though he could see she was still processing it all. "I don't know how to thank you, Kwaku." "You already have," he said, "by being here, by not giving up on me when I was too young to understand why you had to leave." Her eyes shone. "I never stopped caring about you, not for a single day." He smiled faintly. "Then let's start fresh. No more running, no more hiding." In the weeks that followed, Alma settled into the penthouse as though she'd always belonged there. The lines in her face softened, her laughter came easier, and she began to speak of her dreams again, small things she had buried long ago. Quokka found himself rearranging his schedule to have breakfast with her on the balcony, to listen to her stories of the past, to remember the war